gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 20. Hey, Jealousy. Hermione. Late Thursday night into early Friday morning, October 28th and 29th, 1999. Peckwater Flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. Hermione had only just fallen asleep that night when the screaming from the sitting room began. She was up, out of her bedroom door, and across the tiny flat in less than an instant. She was perched on the sofa at Draco's side before she was hardly even aware that she was awake. Won't let mine. His familiar voice screamed in the dark. Malfoy, it's all right, she said, scooting closer to him on the small sofa. But his thrashing only intensified. Draco, wake up! In desperation, she took his bare shoulders in her hands, shaking him to rouse him from the grips of his nightmare. His eyes finally flew open, and for a moment she worried that he was seeing not her, but whatever had been terrifying him in the dream. She blinked. Her rational brain knew that she should be fearful of what he might do to her in his current state, but looking into his eyes, something rabid and ferociously protective burned white-hot there, and she was so startled by it that she forgot to be scared of him. Then he was holding her desperately in his arms, pulling her tight against his warm body. My God, you're all right. His hands seemed to be trying to reassure his sleep-confused brain that this was reality, not just a continuation of whatever his dream had been about. He touched her hair, her neck, the shell of her ear. He pressed his face into her neck, and she could feel the drag of his lips across her heated skin. In his half-asleep state he was kissing her, and despite the fact that she knew she shouldn't take advantage of a man in Draco's altered condition, she held him just as close for a few moments longer than necessary. Finally, she pushed reluctantly at his shoulders. Draco, you were having a bad dream. You're awake now. It's all right. His eyes were still wide with fear, but seemed much more lucid as he pulled back. Hermione, my apologies. You don't... she began, then stopped. She almost said, You don't have anything to apologize for. But then she caught herself. He might have been the one to kiss her, but she almost felt as though she'd been taking advantage of him, whilst he was in the grip of night terrors. If anything, she should probably be the one apologizing. Although, had he said, You're all right, or I'm all right? In her panic to wake him, she couldn't remember now. What exactly had the dream been about? To cover her embarrassment, she said, It's all right, you were only confused. You were having a nightmare. Do you remember what it was about? Draco took a bit of time to calm down that night. Somehow, he even managed to turn the conversation around from his nightmare to hers, namely that of her failing grades. They compared their examinations papers, and Hermione was shocked to see that their answers were often the same, even as their grades were very different. Draco peered closer at her assessment examination papers, and tapped them with his wand to perform a finite incantatum, but nothing happened. He, however, stared at them with shock. Did it change for you as well? He asked. She was flummoxed. Did what change? It looks exactly the same as it did before. Did it change for you? Yes. What? How did that happen? She asked in confusion, looking more closely at the papers. Hermione, I don't know. Her mind reeled. This was no accidental magic, she was sure. If it truly had changed for him, but not for her, someone had tampered with her grades deliberately, maliciously. Who could have done this? Draco's silver eyes were luminous as they bore into hers. She very nearly could not look at him, such was the heat of his stare. "Hermione, I'm not sure what's going on, but we will get to the bottom of this." He snaked an arm around her then, holding her close. Her breath caught in her chest at his kindness, and at his proximity. When she chanced another look up at him, he was staring at the examinations, a hard gleam in his eyes. She could practically see the wheels of his mind turning, his cunning Slytherin instinct at work. Was he serious about trying to figure it out? What was going on? What could he do about it? She bit her lip, worried now not only about her grades, but about what Draco might be planning as well. Even after Draco left her alone to get a bit more rest, Hermione could not calm her mind enough to fall asleep easily. The questions about her grades, and about any plans that Draco was possibly formulating, swirled in her brain. Finally, around 2 o'clock in the morning, she gave up sleeping as a bad job, and sat down at her desk to pen a letter that she'd been drafting in her mind for over half an hour. When the letter was finished, she cast a muffling charm on her room, turning on the spot to apparate to the alleyway near the visitors' entrance at the Ministry of Magic in London. She left the letter for Chief Daggery of the Wizengamot at the front desk. The Chief Warlock had struck her as a fair-minded man during the Death Eater trials that she'd attended, and she knew that he would do what he could to work out this conundrum. Back in her room less than an hour later, she turned the words that she'd written in her letter over in her mind. In the note, she had called Draco a close friend, a confidant. She had tiptoed up to a line, too fearful to cross it. "I care for him very much," she had written to Daggery, but she had not told her whole truth. She had been too much of a coward. Tears of shame mixed with regret sprang to her eyes. So much for her Gryffindor bravery. Sure, she worried about what people would think if they knew the truth. Her friends, her enemies, everyone was certain to have an opinion, and whilst she honestly didn't care about most of them, she would be lying if she said that none of their opinions mattered. But there was one person, the one who should have been the first to know how she felt, and that was the one person she couldn't tell. He was off-limits in so many ways, involved with another woman, surrounded by family and friends who put so much stock into blood purity. Her former childhood bully, regardless of how much he'd changed. Draco had told her over and over again, with his words and with his actions, that he only wanted her friendship and nothing more. But tonight, seeing him put aside his own fears and worries to turn his attention to hers, Hermione could no longer deny her own feelings. They ran deeper than just a thrill at his touch, more lasting than goose pimples from a kiss on her neck when he'd been half asleep. For the first time in a long time, tonight she'd felt something that seemed so unlikely. Draco had held her in his arms, he'd offered comfort to her for her worries, and had allowed her to give him comfort for his nightmare. He had looked into her eyes with a gaze that burned so fiercely, so urgently, in defense of her. What had passed between them tonight hadn't just felt like the solace that one friend offered another in a time of need. For Hermione, it felt a lot like love, and that made her insides ache, because if there was one thing that she knew for certain, it was this: Draco Malfoy did not, could not, love her back. Friday, October 29th, 1999. The next night she lay awake for a long time, idly watching the dim lamplight that seeped underneath her bedroom door. It had been a long day, mostly spent wondering if the Wizengamot chief had received her letter, and what, if anything, would be done about her accusations. Draco had been acting strangely all day as well, having skipped the first classes of the day. At some point in the evening, he'd gotten excited about her quick-quote squill, of all things. Thankfully, he seemed to have gone off the idea of solving the riddle of her grades, which was for the best, she reasoned. Now, the former Slytherin was still awake, working on something by lamplight in the sitting room until the wee hours in the morning. After a while, the sitting room lamp finally turned off, extinguishing the sliver of light from under her door and plunging her room into darkness. Perhaps he was finally going to sleep. "Tempus," she whispered in the dark, reaching out her fingers to graze the end of her wand. The numerals for the time floated briefly in the air next to the bed, just a bit after 2 o'clock in the morning. There were shuffling noises from the kitchen, and what sounded like a bang or a door slamming. Apparently Draco was still awake. She wondered if he was making tea. Then she wondered if he was waiting for her to join him. As she opened her bedroom door and entered the sitting room, Hermione caught a glimpse of Theo disappearing into the door of his own bedroom. His door closed quickly behind him. She looked around, surprised to find the sitting room empty. Now she saw that the light was on in the tiny washroom, and whispered voices were talking behind it. Hermione crept quietly to the toilet door, confused. Theo was in his room. Who could Draco be talking to? The whispers sounded urgent, but Draco had cast a muffling charm, so the voices were indistinct but heated. More silence, then the faint, muffled sound of bottles being knocked over and grunting noises. She drew closer, a sinking feeling in her chest. That loud sound. Could it have been the front door? Without thinking, she pressed against the washroom door and knocked. "Draco?" The silence behind the door was instant and deafening. With wide eyes, her sleep-deprived mind put the puzzling pieces together quickly of what must be happening behind the washroom door. Merlin's ass! Draco was nearly a 20-year-old man, she chastised herself. He was in a relationship, and he didn't have a proper bedroom in which to entertain. It was none of her business what he did behind closed doors. Cringing at her own inability to leave him well enough alone, Hermione called quietly through the door, "Draco, I'm going back to my room. I apologize for disturbing you and your... again, my apologies." She raced on nimble feet back to her room, leaving Draco alone with his... whomever he was entertaining in the washroom. As she passed quickly through the sitting room, she reached out for Crookshanks, picking up the sleeping furball and bringing him with her. She huddled with him on the bed, reliving her horrifying embarrassment of the last several minutes. After a moment, there was a knock on the bedroom door. Was Draco coming to tell her off for disturbing them? She did not know if she could survive it, if so. She flicked on her bedside lamp and summoned a book from the desk, pretending that he'd caught her reading. "The door's unlocked," she called in a wavering voice. Even in the low light she could see the flush of his chest above his low joggers. A swell of jealousy for Amelia, or whoever he'd been with in the washroom, flared low in her belly, and she pushed the emotion aside angrily as he spoke. "I'm done in the toilet, if you need to go in." Avoiding his gaze, she hurried past him into the washroom. It looked the same as it always had. Bottles and tubes and pots of salves all about, blonde hairs festering in the sink. She gave it all a wry smile. Apparently, even Amelia's visit didn't warrant a moment to clean up his mess, she thought, with hardened amusement. Back in the sitting room, she found him on the sofa, working to get comfortable in the cramped space. About earlier. My apologies, Draco. I know it's difficult for you to date properly, not having proper privacy, with the sitting room as your bedroom and everything." His silver eyes flashed angrily at her. "No, it's nothing like that." She rushed to interrupt him. "Listen, if you wish to entertain sometime during the day, I'm sure that Theo and I can go—" "No, Granger!" Draco barked out, looking almost as uncomfortable as she felt. Hermione, I mean, there's really no need. If it's all right with you, I'd rather not discuss this again." Oh gods, she'd made it more awkward, she realized now. Draco was aggravated and embarrassed. He likely never wanted to speak of it at all again, and she'd had to go bring it up almost immediately. Godric on a goat, when was she going to learn to keep her thoughts to herself around this wizard? That night, as she had many nights before, she dreamt about Draco. They were going to the Halloween soiree together, which in the dream seemed a lot like Yule Ball, years ago. But rather than being dressed as Mr. Darcy, Draco wore a leather jacket and a white t-shirt, looking more like Danny Zuko from the film Grease. He led their classmates in teasing her for her dowdy Regency dress, and she'd run away crying as he and Amelia danced together. Waking from the stream around 5 o'clock that morning, she found it hard to fall back asleep. Even her most boring textbook could not lull her back into slumber. When she finally forced herself out of bed a couple of hours later, she found Draco smiling to himself in the kitchenette. "Reliving a bit of your commode carousing?" she asked waspishly, unable to keep the bite from her tone. She was already regretting not getting better sleep. No," Draco said. He sounded contrite, and she immediately felt like an even bigger ass. Theo came in, asking which cozies they should go with for the soiree that evening. "Vampires," Hermione quipped. "After all, you already suck." She said it in jest, but she knew from the way his face fell that he was hurt. Hermione closed her eyes in embarrassment at her own idiocy. She needed to get away from this man before she truly said something she regretted. "I'm off to the gym. See you later." She was meeting Jason at 9 for a workout, and she was going to need every minute of the walk to the gym to calm herself down. "I thought I might stop by around 7 o'clock for you tonight," Jason said, only slightly out of breath as he ran on the treadmill. "That sounds fine," she answered, without really hearing him, her mind still stuck in her memories of last night and this morning with Draco. "Did you decide that the cravat looked better than the ruff with my cozy?" he asked. "Brilliant! I'm looking forward to it," she said enthusiastically. He continued his pace for several seconds before saying, "I thought perhaps we could take the Millennium Falcon to the party tonight, if Han Solo will let me borrow it." "That would be lovely," she replied. Jason pressed the pause button on his machine, slowing to a walk before stepping off. "Is something wrong?" Hermione looked at him as if seeing him for the first time that morning. She plastered on a huge smile of her own and pressed the same button on her machine. "What?" He smiled faintly. "You just don't seem all here today. Is everything all right?" She sighed, rubbing at her temples. "I'm sorry, Jason. I had a difficult night's sleep last night. I'm afraid I'm not going to be very good company this evening." "That's all right. I'm sure we'll have a great time, anyway," he offered. "Why don't we go for a coffee? There's an adorable little cafe down close to the bus station. I think they serve pastries as well." She gave him a thin smile of her own. "Sure, I'd like that." Over coffee, they talked a bit about their living situations. Hermione was surprised and pleased to learn that Jason still lived at home with his mum, having grown up here in Oxford. "I didn't realize that. It must have been nice, growing up surrounded by academia." "It was all right," he answered shortly. "My parents are divorced, and my mother was estranged from her family, so the Oxford campus sort of became a second home, you might say. You say that you live in Peckwater. I didn't know they had 3-bedroom flats there. How did you end up with 2 flatmates?" "Rather an odd story," she said with a tired smile. "I've known both of my flatmates for years, so it was an easy enough decision at the time, considering the housing shortage that the campus was experiencing." Jason considered this before nodding. Oh, I didn't realize there was a shortage. Since I didn't apply for accommodations, it wasn't a concern for me. Well, perhaps next year you won't need to live with him again." The thought brought Hermione up short. Other than her parents, with whom she was not on the best of terms, and Lavender and Parvati, she had not lived with anyone for as long as she had Theo and Draco. The idea of moving on without them seemed strangely disquieting, which was completely silly, she knew. In only a bit over a year, she could not have grown so close to the two Slytherin wizards that she would miss them that much. "I should go. I'd like to work a bit on my partnership project for constitutional law before tonight's soiree," she said, standing up. The dark-haired man stood as well. "I shall see you tonight, Miss Bennet," he said, giving a proper, fussy little bow. She giggled, leaning forward to kiss him on the lips. She pushed herself against him, waiting for a spark to ignite within her. It didn't. Which was all right, she told herself. The spark that she'd wished for did threaten to positively engulf her just a few hours later. The only problem was she was pressed against an entirely different man at that moment. After a short rest and a shower, Hermione was almost dressed and ready for the Halloween soiree when there'd been a knock on her bedroom door. She opened it to find Draco looking positively indecent, wrapped only in a towel and baring his vampire teeth. As she stared at him, actual blood began pouring from his mouth. Her eyes widened. "Draco! Oh my God, are you all right?" She pulled him inside the room, depositing him quickly onto the bed and trying her level best to ignore the fact that he was naked under the towel that he clutched closed at his waist. He made a strangled noise through the blood in his mouth. "Open up, let me heal you," she offered, grabbing her wand from her nightstand. His legs parted, allowing her to stand between them, snug between the broom thighs that had featured heavily in her dreams for months now. Her fingers caressed his jaw, running lightly across the stubble of his cheek. She could feel the heat from his shower, still radiating off the smooth, defined muscles of his chest. His eyes stared into hers, and she stayed transfixed right where she was, long after his lip was healed. And that's how Jason found them, her body pressed against Draco's, leaning over him and wondering exactly how those teeth would feel, sinking breathlessly into her own hot skin. The Halloween soiree was incredibly boring. Nearly every woman save Hermione was dressed like a trollop. Amelia Bennet had decided upon a uniquely revealing take on a Regency ensemble, seeking to dress as a literal streetwalker, in Hermione's estimation, which did not seem to bother Draco in the slightest. Draco was making a concerted effort to drink himself silly, and somewhere along the way, Hermione decided to do the same. Perhaps it was when she saw how half the women in the room seemed to be undressing the blonde wizard with their eyes. Or perhaps it was when Draco practically pinned Amelia against a wall with his hips. Whatever it was, Hermione wanted to forget this night in its entirety as quickly as possible. 5 drinks in, she was just beginning to wonder if drinking this much had been a mistake, even as she knew it was a bit late for that. "You ready to go?" Jason asked her, leering glassy-eyed at her. "Merlin, yes, let's!" she giggled, sending Jason into a fit of laughter. "Merlin, you come up with the craziest nonsense, Hermione," Jason said as they left, weaving in a drunken, jovial way. "I do," she said agreeably, favouring the man with a beautiful smile as they stumbled along the pavement towards her flat. When they neared Peckwater, Jason asked, "Let me walk you up to your flat, all right?" "What? Oh, all right," Hermione answered. As they neared her flat, her mood had shifted from carefree to maudlin. The flat was full of nothing but reminders of Draco, who was still back at the soiree, likely cozying up with Amelia even more now that most of the partygoers had departed. She shouldn't let the blonde git crowd her thoughts this way. She had a man right here, and whilst it was true that before tonight Jason had seemed a bit of a cold fish, he was at least kind and handsome and not involved with someone else. Who knew? Perhaps the drinks might loosen Jason up a bit, and he might offer her a proper distraction after all. She remembered something Parvati had told her once, when Ron had begun dating Lavender, and she'd had no date to Slughorn's Christmas do. The best way to get over a man is to get under another one. Perhaps it was time to take that advice. Upstairs in the flat, she was working up the courage to suggest just that when Draco fell out of the coat closet of their flat, completely starkers. He was clutching a scarf over his cock and looking at her as though she had betrayed him. "Malfoy, what the fuck are you doing, hiding in the coat closet?" she asked in complete shock. Jason seemed especially annoyed. "Where are your clothes? And how exactly did you get here? Didn't we just leave you at the party 15 minutes ago, drunk off your ass?" There was the sound of drunken laughter from the tiny washroom. A woman's voice, it had to be Amelia, called out, "What's happening out there? I'll just be another minute. I've got my thong and my stockings all wrapped around each other." Hermione fought the sudden and stupid, angry tears that sprang to her eyes as she stared at Draco. Right," Jason said, his eyes looking uncertainly from Hermione to Draco. "Well, it's a bit crowded here. I should probably be going." Draco mumbled something rude about muggles, and her righteous, drunken indignation flared. How dare he insult this boring, attractive man who had walked her home, evidently intending to offer her a decent time tonight when no one else had done so? Why was it perfectly fine for him to entertain random women in the washroom, but not all right for her to do the same with a man that she'd known for weeks? She fumed, the alcohol goading her on, and made an offer to Jason that she hoped he wouldn't refuse. "No, I'm not ready for you to go just yet, Jason. Perhaps you'd like to stay the night." There was another indistinct mumble from Draco, and her heart broke just a bit as she heard his words. "Granger, are you absolutely sure?" No, she was not sure. She wanted to scream. She did not especially want to sleep with Jason. Not now. Not in this flat. Possibly not ever. But she could not be the sad, lonely, muggle-born witch crying herself to sleep alone, whilst Draco fucked another woman right outside her bedroom door. Her drunken brain supplied. "Did you just call Hermione a whore?" Jason thundered, his just beneath the surface dislike for Draco suddenly frothing in drunken belligerence. Hermione turned a confused look upon the muggle man. Draco seemed highly affronted. "Fuck no! I would never! I was simply asking if she was certain that she wished to entertain this evening." Her drunken rage at Draco was now overtaking Jason's. "I don't see how that's any of your business, Malfoy." "Granger, you don't need to—" Draco began weakly. She struggled to keep her voice steady as she cut him off. "Don't tell me what I do and do not need to do. I believe Amelia needs your help in there. Come on, Jason." Jason stumbled towards her, and she grabbed his hand, pulling him behind her. Her magic flung open her bedroom door in front of them, unnoticed by the man following her. In the darkness, she summoned a pair of Draco's underwear from his drawer, flinging them out into the sitting room before slamming the door behind them. "Hermione, he was bang out of order for saying that," Jason slurred, his heavy hand clapping down onto her shoulder as his eyelids struggled to stay open. "It's all right, Jason. Here, come lie down," she said, leading him to the bed. Jason stumbled to the edge of the bed, kicking off his boots and climbing on top of her red bedspread. You're a good person, Hermione. I don't care what people say about you. I don't think... you're not like the other ones." Hermione faltered as she stepped out of her shoes. "What other ones? Who says things about me, Jason?" "You know, lots of people. But I don't think you're gonna hurt me. You're not a bad one." With this pronouncement, Jason fell forward onto the bed, one arm in and one arm out of his jacket. In a matter of seconds he was snoring heavily. Hermione stared at him for several seconds, in drunken puzzlement. She summoned one of the blankets from the bed, placing it on the floor and performing a cushioning charm upon it. She lay there for a long time, turning the man's sleepy, confusing words over and over in her head for several minutes, until the alcohol caught up with her, and she fell into a bewildered sleep. Sunday, October 31st, 1999. The next morning, Jason's snores from the bed woke her just after dawn. From her spot on the floor, she stared up at the ceiling of the room, wondering what to do now. Could she get Jason past Draco without waking him? "Jason!" she called in a loud whisper. The snores paused briefly, then continued. She stood, contemplating the fancy dress she still wore from the night before. Transfiguring it into a jumper and a long skirt seemed easier than changing clothes, so she did so. She tried to rouse Jason again. "Jason, can I help you get home?" The man opened one eye, which roamed about the room in a dizzying pace. "Where am I?" "You're in my bedroom," she supplied. His brow furrowed. "Hermione?" She nodded. "That's right." Jason rubbed at his eyes, then blinked mightily as he looked down at himself, still fully dressed. "Did we fuck? Was I any good?" In spite of her desire to get this man out of her room rapidly, and without detection from anyone else, Hermione could not help laughing. "You were a perfect gentleman," she assured him. "Oh," Jason said, looking disappointed in himself. "You up for trying it now?" Perhaps another time. Let me walk you to your flat, all right?" she asked brightly, hoping to have him out before Amelia and Draco woke outside in the sitting room. Jason struggled to stand, pushing his stockinged feet into the dressy boots on the floor. It was clear that at least a bit of the alcohol still coursed through his body. "Probably for the best. My mum likely stayed up half the night waiting for me. You wouldn't happen to have some coffee, would you, love?" Hermione smiled thinly. "Let's just stop on the way to yours and grab something. I believe Draco and his girlfriend are asleep in the sitting room." But to her surprise, Draco was alone on the sofa, passed out, wearing only the underwear that she'd thrown at him the night before. It seemed that even Amelia had standards, and had abandoned the tiny sofa and the disgusting flat for the comfort of her own bed at some point in the night. "I don't remember your place looking this awful. When I came for you yesterday, were you robbed last night?" Jason asked as he looked around the room, shouldering on the fancy dress jacket cozy from the night before. Or did your flatmate throw a wobbler because he was pissed to the wind?" Possibly. One of those two things," Hermione said, shuffling him to the door. As they crossed Tom Quad, her mind went back to what Jason had been saying before he fell asleep. With an odd sense of déjà vu, remembering when she'd asked Draco the same question on an early morning walk for breakfast, Hermione began, "Jason, do you mind if I ask you something?" "Of course not," he said, smiling down at her. "Last night you said something kind of odd. You said I wasn't like the other ones, that I wasn't a bad one, and that you didn't think I would hurt you. Can you tell me what you meant?" She watched his face carefully, as it first turned scared, then nervous. He gave a little laugh of dismissal. "Blimey, I must have been right pissed to the wind myself to say all that." At her disbelieving look he continued with a chuckle. "In secondary, my mum always warned me against dating Oxford girls.
Didn't want them corrupting her baby boy and all that tosh, I suppose."
There was an uneasy silence between them for a moment, before she gave a little laugh of her own. Right, that must have been it. Coffee and bacon sandwiches acquired from the nearby Tesco Express, they continued towards Jason's house. On the way, they discussed their classes.
"How is your partner assignment going for Constitutional?" he asked.
"All right. Amelia is rather hard to pin down for a time to meet, but hopefully soon. How's yours?"
"David's a good bloke. A bit stodgy, but he's smart. We're nearly done with it, I think,"
Jason answered, stuffing the last bit of his sandwich into his mouth. Hermione nodded. "Did you always want to study law?"
"Blimey, no. I wanted to be a chef for many years. My old man was a chef. But my mum hates him. She said I need to make something better for myself. The law seems as good a way as any."
"Can I meet your mum?" Jason looked uneasy.
It's maybe not the best morning for it. She likes to have a lie-in on Sundays. As a matter of fact, I may just go for a walk in the park, give her a chance to rest a bit longer."
Hermione tilted her head at him curiously, eyeing his Regency-style ensemble dubiously. "Are you going to take a walk in that?"
Jason laughed. "I thought I looked right dashing."
She laughed. "Of course you do. Would you like some company?"
No. If it's all right, I like to take in nature on my own."
She worked to keep the perplexed look off of her face. "Well, I'm going to head back to Peckwater. I should probably get something more accomplished towards that partnership assignment." He pulled her close, planting a soft, insistent kiss on her lips that tasted of coffee. She tried to relax against him, reaching her arms around him to pull him closer. He pushed her away lightly.
"It was a pleasure spending the last evening with you, Miss Granger."
Hermione smiled without teeth, and Jason sauntered away, occasionally looking over his shoulder at her to wave goodbye once more. All the while she tried to ignore the strange feeling along her spine. When Jason woke, he said that his mother likely stayed up to wait for him. But when Hermione asked to meet the woman, suddenly she was having a lie-in, and Jason wanted to go for a walk. Alone. This, compounded by his lack of affection towards her, and his drunken comments from the night before, had her wondering exactly what was going on. She ducked into the park's nearby WC, quickly disillusioning herself and hurrying back out along the garden path. From the doorway of the toilets, she caught sight of Jason once more. He must have assumed that Hermione left the park, because he turned back and was now walking back the way that they'd come. She waited until he was half a block away before following him. He continued to check over his shoulder occasionally, but her disillusionment spell and their distance apart prevented him from noticing her. Jason made a short series of turns after exiting the park, finally walking up the overgrown garden path of a squat, unassuming brownstone, semi-detached house. He disappeared inside with one final glance over his shoulder. Hermione waited 10 minutes before moving closer, still disillusioned. Lifting the latch for the gate as quietly as she could, she snuck up the garden path to look at the names on the letterbox. One read Mendelssohn. The other read Perkins Coleridge. Hermione froze. Jason's mother. Could she possibly be Advisor Perkins? She thought back to that first interaction with him outside of the advisor's office. He had not specifically said that he was there for academic advice. What if he'd only stopped by to see his mother before his first day of classes? Advisor Perkins was a witch, wasn't she? Hermione assumed so. The woman knew about magic, after all, even if she'd avoided performing it herself the morning they'd met. But now Hermione was questioning everything. Was Miranda Perkins even magical? Was Jason himself a wizard? A squib? Did he know that she was a witch? Or was the name Perkins merely an odd coincidence? Her rational brain wanted to believe it was simple happenstance, but her instinct would not allow it. Something was going on, she felt sure, but she had no idea what it was. The morning clouds that had hovered threateningly overhead for the last half-hour finally opened up, unleashing a torrent of rain, splashing and rebounding off of her disillusioned body. Ducking between two bushes, just outside of Jason's garden gate, she cancelled her disillusionment spell after looking around to make sure that she was quite alone. Hermione pulled her berry-purple scarf closer around her neck and hurried back towards Peckwater, lost in thought. She did not see the flick of a curtain in the window of the brownstone behind her.
Gives a fuck about an Oxford comma. I seen those English dramas too. They're cruel.
Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great 78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.